This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, thank you. Good morning again, everybody. And this is our 13th session of wandering through the big book. And we've been through the doctor's opinion and Bill's story, and there is a solution and more about alcoholism. And today we're entering into we agnostics. I've been looking back at what we did. It was it was a long time ago that we started this, and we did 5 sessions on we agnostics, and I don't know that it'll be that long this time, but it's only 14 pages. Well, you add the spiritual appendix, maybe you're up to 16 pages. We'll see how far we get. And I've heard other people say this. I've read a lot of spiritual literature, and I think we agnostics is just really a masterpiece, and it makes a lot of promises and it gives us a lot of advice. And I hope, I hope some of that stuff will come out as we go through it. One of the points I'm going to try to make today is that that our real problem is not alcoholism. Our real problem is agnosticism. And it takes a long time. It's taken me a long time to see that. And also to see the connection between my fear and my agnosticism. And it's why this part of it is so important, and why it's the greatest single place where most people in Alcoholics Anonymous break down and leave the fellowship. For whatever reason, their self-reliance is way stronger than their awareness of God in their life. And they simply decide that I'm going to follow my own advice. We're going to get later in this chapter, when we get to page 49, it's going to say something that I think is really revolutionary, and it's really along this theme of you only have 2 alternatives. We did that reading. If you're number 3, if you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, you only have 2 choices. One is keep doing what you're doing, go on to the bitter end, trying to blot out of your mind how miserable you are. And the other is to accept spiritual help, which is what I think the 3rd step prayer is trying to do. It's trying to say, I am willing to try to grow along spiritual lines as the only alternative. That's what's important, is the only alternative to keep going on to the bitter end. And but I think a lot of times we don't understand that. And I don't think I really understood it till I experienced powerlessness over me, which is the ultimate fear for me. I believe that fear is of the body and the mind. I think fear of the body is necessary for me to stay alive in human form on the planet. If I'm not afraid of not getting enough food or water or sleep or protecting my physical body from a variety of threats, I'm not going to be here long. And but when fear gets into the mind, something different happens. And when my fear gets into my mind, conversation somewhere yesterday about how we go from nothing to I'm going to die. It's just my mind will do that quick. My mind is like physical fear on steroids. It just blows up. And what fascinates me, we've done considerable talking about the 3 aspects of the disease: the physical aspect, the mental aspect, and the spiritual aspect. And what we do is we name it, and then we go looking for what is the symptom by which I know I have it. And once I know I have it, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to treat it? And what are you offering as the promises of me treating that part of my disease? It's page 20 of the introduction to the study guide. And it's just a great reminder of understanding our disease and our problem and what our problem really is. So the physical part is, we call it an allergy, an abnormal reaction to alcohol that most of the world doesn't have, which means I don't stop. Normal reaction is 1 or 2 drinks, stop, take it or leave it, stop. But if we've got this allergy thing, we can't stop. What's the treatment? Only treatment is abstinence. That's all we got. But you get to step 2 and it gets, the mental aspect, and it gets a little bit more challenging. I like strange mental blank spot. We read about that last week. That's what Fred the accountant uses, because his life is great. My life has been great. I've never wanted for much, except serenity. And Fred says that my life was pretty good, but I had this strange mental blank spot. How do I know I have a strange mental blank spot? Well, the answer is the failure of the hot stove defense. I get burned by alcohol, but I've got this blank spot because I need relief so badly that alcohol brings to me. So I blank out the reality. Bill said in his story, I saw that I could not take much as a single drink. He saw it. I never saw it. My entire 50-year drinking career, I never saw it. That the trouble starts with the first drink, not the fourth. I was always trying to stop at 4. How do I know I have a strange mental blank spot? The failure of the hot stove defense. We don't see it. And what's the treatment for the mental part? Well, in this presentation, the treatment is steps 4 through 9. We're doing 4 through 9 to try to clean this thing out, clean the mind out of all its preoccupations, its obsessions, its fears and concerns, whatever, so that we can enter into relationship with God. This whole thing is about by whatever you call it, and that's the real importance of the first part of We Agnostics, because it's going to say it does not matter what your concept of higher power is. All that matters is that you've got something to go on. And it's why when Bill and Bob are meeting they're doing the first 12th step call of our fellowship. And they're meeting with this guy named Bill Dodson in the hospital. Bill Dodson is flabbergasted that he's back in the hospital and terrified that when he goes out, he's going to drink again. No idea. And Bill and Bob ask him 5 questions. They don't have the book. They don't have a fellowship. They don't have meetings. All they got is their Oxford group experience. First question, do you want to stop drinking? They're not even going to go on if he doesn't mind. And they keep saying, if you don't, that's fine. We got to find somebody that does. Because if we don't do this thing, we're not staying sober ourselves. Second question, do you think you can do it on your own? Do you think you've got enough human power? They haven't even written We Agnostics yet, which is going to say your problem is lack of power. And we're not talking about human power. That's something that I got it theoretically, but I did not get it experientially until I was in this period of complete powerlessness over how horrible I felt. Then I understood powerlessness. And then I understood how hard I have to work at this thing in all 4 aspects of this thing: meetings, one-on-one interactions, service commitments, and most of all, prayer and meditation, the triangle inside the circle. I don't have any doubt now, and I don't want to go back, and it pushes me forward. So mental part, I'm really trying to get the spiritual. So mental part, strange mental blank spot, failure of the hot stove defense, and steps 4 through 9. After a decision to grow along spiritual lines, step 3, 4 through 9, to clean this thing out so I can actually be receptive to the grace of God. And the grace of God in this is defined as the guidance and the power. 2 parts: guidance, tell me what to do, and through my intuition, not through my intellectual mind, tell me what to do and give me the focus and the power to do it. So you get to the spiritual, and of course the promises of treatment back in sobriety, no headaches, no hangovers, no handcuffs, no, the physical part of our problem, that when you get to The mental part, the promises are the fourth step promises. Well, third, you could start with the third step promises, fourth step promises, fifth step promises, all the way through, not just the ninth step promises, which we're going to deal with later on as being the opposite of the bedevilments. We're going to hear the bedevilments in here. And there's a wonderful little thing comes off the jaywalker.com site where they put the bedevilments down the left side of the paper and they put the ninth step promises down the right side of the paper, and they correlate them in some way. We start off with this, trouble with human relationships, and go to a ninth step promise that's the opposite of trouble with human relationships. It's a wonderful way of looking at what we go through. So those are the promises of treatment. Now we get to the spiritual malady, and I'm going to call it agnostic. I'm agnostic. What's that mean? I'm agnostic. It means I have a lot of doubt about the reality and the power of God. Right? I have a belief, but I've got doubt about that belief or about the applicability of that belief in my life. You know, and it's interesting, some guy invented the word agnostic, and I don't remember him, but I'm told it was in the 1700s. And I don't think it meant what as we think about it today, the original definition, because there was this term Gnostic, Gnostic, and those were spiritual people who were aware of the presence of God way beyond any intellectual doubt. They called it knowing, and it wasn't intellectual knowing, it was experiential knowing, a whole different deal than what most of us experience. So he added this A, which meant against or whatever, and the original definition was, it's impossible to prove the reality of a spiritual power with the mind and the body. It's really fantastic, because what he's saying, if you're trying to prove the reality of God based on your mind and your body, you're never going to get there, because we're talking about a different type of knowing. And for most of us, this type of knowing comes through the intuitive mind, not through the intellectual mind. And that's why it's so important. It's been so important for me, because I'm a way over intellectual person. And it's so important for me that what really happened in a way for me was, in this darkness that I was in for a full frickin' year, plus the entry into it and the exit from it. It was at least a year. And I really eventually got to the second part of step 2. You know, it's great. Do you believe, or are you even willing to believe in a power greater than yourself? Yeah, sure. Sure. Why not? You know, that's the first part. The second part is, do you think this power can restore you to sanity? That's a way different deal, because first I got to admit I'm insane. And then I got to invite this power in some kind of way, and the main way we do it is prayer and meditation and service. That's how we invite that power in to heal me. And that's all I could do at the end for me, was lay as still as I could lay and ask this power to come into me and do its work. You know, you've probably heard before, an 8-word prayer. I don't know where it comes from. Empty me. Empty me of my self-will. Empty me. Heal me. You can't heal me if I'm not empty. As long as I'm clinging to all my stuff, how are you going to be able to heal me? I got to open myself to this healing business. Empty me. Heal me. Then guide me. Tell me what to do. And finally, my mind, use me, you know. And that immediately brings up that 10-step question. The ultimate question for us is, how can I best serve you? Not how can I best feel good? How can I best serve you? Thy will, not mine, be. Can I make my life about you instead of making my life about me? How can I best serve you? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must, M-U-S-T, not a suggestion, must go with us constantly. This is the proper use of the human will. Dude. So, spiritual malady, agnosticism, doubt about God. How do I know I'm agnostic? A 4-letter word that starts with F, fear. How do I know I'm agnostic? Because I am afraid about whatever. I know my ultimate fear is I'm afraid of how I'm going to feel when the thing that I tell you I'm afraid of happens. Because I do not like experiencing powerlessness over me. I do not like experience. I mean, this all came out of this depression. I couldn't stand it. I mean, everything was dull and gray, and to do anything was painful. I couldn't watch the news. I didn't want to see anybody. I mean, it's not stuff that anybody wants to experience, and I could not experience it. That's powerlessness. And that is my greatest fear, is my powerlessness over me. I have met the enemy, and he is me. Okay, I don't want to get lost here. We're in the third column, the spiritual malady. Naming it, I'm agnostic. How do I know I'm agnostic? Because I fear. Well, now, why do I say that? Well, what's the fear page say? We put our fears down on paper and we ask ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? You know, I'm doing what my mind tells me to do. I'm responding to my human body and my human mind, and I'm doing what my mind tells me to do. And it keeps not working out. I follow my own advice, and it doesn't work out. That's why I fear. Wow, you mean I fear because I'm agnostic, meaning I fear because I don't have any place else to go. All I got is self-reliance. I can't say, hey, God, could you help me out here? Because all I got is this thing. And its voice is so loud, and its concerns, it makes them so great. You know, I can't hear anything even if I ask. And why we have to go through, what do I get as a result of my self-reliance? Resentment, fear, and remorse. Boom, boom, boom. Those are the fruits of my self-reliance. Do I want that? Well, no. The only reason I could possibly want them is because they feel powerful, particularly resentment. They feel powerful, and that gets me over my self-doubt. You know, I heard somebody was at Nephat's, and she talked about resentment being delicious. And the whole room broke up and kind of laughed because she was saying something that's true. You know, when I feel anger or resentment, I feel powerful. I don't feel weak and lack of power at all. In fact, I'm convinced I can kill you with my resentment. You know, I mean, I think my anger is so powerful, and it is. I mean, it's a great energy producer and everything. Any rate, so what do I call it? Agnosticism. How do I know I'm agnostic? Because I fear. Because I have no relationship with higher power. And So how do I treat it? I treat it with 10, 11, and 12 every day. Somewhere in here, I guess it's 10, yeah, it says, so now that we've entered the world of the spirit, our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. That's to grow in our mental faculties, that's the understanding part, and our physical capacity, behavior, that's the grow in understanding and effectiveness, mind and body. And how am I going to grow? I'm going to grow by trying to improve this relationship with this spiritual whatever it is. Because it doesn't matter, whatever it is. And essentially, that is steps 11 and 12. That's all. You know, growing in my understanding happens through 11. And then the behavior part happens in 12. And 10 is really, in my view, establishing the conditions. It's an old Oxford group fundamental principle that if I will establish the conditions, God will do the work. I can't control that, but God will do the work. And step 10 is where we establish the conditions under which a spiritual transformation can take place. So it's really, in my view, part of 11, but I don't care. 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis, and we'll get there. I hope. Okay, so that's the treatment. And what are the promises? Well, the ultimate promise is serenity. If I will do 11 and 12, you know, we read this thing every week. Just to the extent that I humbly rely on God and do as I think God would have me do, will I be enabled to experience spiritual serenity right in the midst of the human calamity? In We Agnostics, he uses the word calamity, and not this time, 4 times, I think, between 46 and doesn't matter, but this word calamity keeps showing up. And, you know, I always had this impression, Calamity Jane, somehow there was some humor to it, but there isn't. There's no humor to calamity. It's dreadful and it's a disaster and just a bunch of negative stuff. It's the worst that could happen. And this idea doesn't say the calamity is going to stop. You know, that's really important. It says that I will be enabled to match the calamity, whatever's going on, you know, and the ultimate calamity, one of the ultimate calamities in our work is suicide by either, you know, a forceful event or by drinking ourselves to death, you know. And it's all through the book. Remember at the end of Bill's story, this guy commits suicide in Bill's home. You know, ask yourself, are you willing to help somebody? And then you find out they commit suicide. Maybe in your home, maybe in your car, maybe in the meeting room. I don't know. I mean, that's the ultimate calamity. But we will be enabled to match that, view that with serenity. Now, for me, I mean, I've been aware that the world has been distinguishing between the mind and the body and the spirit for as long as we've been writing stuff down. I mean, mind, body, spirit goes back to as far back as you can go. And I've always appreciated that, but my physical and mental experience has been so overwhelming that I can't feel the spiritual aspect of my life, my soul. I mean, I'm convinced intellectually it's there, but I got so much going on up here. I got so many concerns, so many things I'm trying to sort out and do and blah, blah, blah. I can't feel the presence of the soul or the presence of God. My mind wants me to jump to something, so I'm going to do it so I can come back to this. But I think our book lays out 3 different levels of awareness of the soul. The first is that we're simply aware of it. The second is that it's the most important fact of our life. And the third one is we will feel as though we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. You got to go through the book to find them, and they're not in that order. Walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe is actually a 5th step promise. It's in We Agnostics that it's going to say the consciousness of the presence of God is the most important fact of our lives. It's a great question to ask yourself. Write down the most important facts of your life and see where the presence of God shows up in that list. Another way of doing that is to write down, all the things that are on your mind that you need to do, and then draw a line and write, improve my relationship with God. See how far down the list improving my relationship with God is compared to the other things that I think are important today. It's really quite something to look back at your life and think about what was important to me. I'm one of 5 kids, and it's the topic we're going to do. We're going to have a Zoom call next week, and it's, what's most important to you now? We're all in our 70s. What's most important to you? And to go back and look at, early school, later school, early adulthood, mid-adulthood, late adulthood, and now we're old. We're old adults. What's most important to me now, right now, compared to those different times of my life? Can I say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of my life? Yes, I can. Can I say I'm on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe? But I'm working on it and I get glimmers. And I know when I get those glimmers, that's when I'm matching the calamity with serenity. I'm still hung up on the calamity and doing my best to keep the sky from falling and put out I already have burned off all the hair, I guess, but stop my hair from burning, I mean, I look forward to that. I take it as the most wonderful promise in the book, particularly because it's also coupled with how to do it. All I got to do is humbly rely on God and behave the way I think God wants me to behave. And I will tell you, for most of us, the key word that we have the most difficulty with is humbly. And the real purpose in my mind of steps 4 through 9 is to bring us off of whatever, it's not a pedestal, but off of whatever thing we're on, and get us humble, where we have admitted to the failure of life on our terms, and we are seeking to know God's primary purpose for my life. This is a big frickin' deal. I believe that the notion of primary purpose has saved my life. The primary purpose of my life before interacting with you all was trying to feel as good as I could for as long as I could. And I had to have money, toys, and alcohol and relationships to do that. And it failed. I didn't make it. I love it when people say my best thinking got me in here. You know, that's the truth. My self-reliance got me in here. I love it when people say, thank God for AA and then thank AA for God. You know, that works for me. Thank God AA exists, and I'm devoted to trying to keep it going in whatever way I can. And I can thank AA for having a relationship with God, because I sure didn't before. Even though I'm a sincere, well-meaning person, and I've done several spiritual disciplines trying to get to God, nothing's done it for me before AA. But primary purpose. So when I feel clear about my primary purpose, as pedestrian as it may be, or as lofty as it may be, when I am clear about my primary purpose, nothing goes wrong. I do whatever I can do to further the primary purpose, and if it doesn't break my way, I'm okay. And actually, ultimately, I think primary purpose is, God, how can I best serve thee? And if I'm anywhere close to that, what could go wrong? If you commit suicide, I don't have to take the blame. If I was trying the hardest under the influence of God to keep you from taking your own life, I'm not able to do this with my kids. That's too much emotional entanglement. My kids each suffer in different ways, and I wind up taking responsibility for it and feel some remorse around it and blah blah blah. But I don't want to get too far. Let's see, what are we doing here? And I think that at the heart of step 11 is me asking God, what is your primary purpose for my life? I think the ultimate problem for me is I make my life more about me than I make it about God. And the best way for me to get there is asking that 10th step question. How can I best serve thee? So I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and whenever the brothers are together, it seems to be a joke competition. I don't know, we start telling jokes, and so my one brother loves to tell this one about this guy trying to strike up a relationship with a woman, and they're at the dinner table, and he's talking all about himself, and she hasn't gotten a word in yet, and then finally he says, well, enough about me. What do you think about me? You know, it's not what about you? It's what do you think about? I mean, that's, you know, that's the way I've lived in a way. So I think that 11 is about, God, what is your primary purpose for my life? And 12 is about putting that into action. And the requirement is that I can't get to that till I get to humble reliance. And I can't get to humble reliance until I've cleared this thing out of its resentments and its fears and its sense of remorse about its previous selfish behavior. Gosh, it's 10 after 9 and we haven't even read any of We Agnostics yet. Okay, We Agnostics. So, where is it? Okay, just a reminder that the real underlying theme of this, well, we stay in the opening words. There are 3 reasons why we're doing this. We're trying to dig into this book, line by line, page by page, in order to deepen and strengthen our own personal recovery, which really means our relationship with God. Number two, we're trying to learn how we can use the big book to help another, right? We're trying to, this is really, at least in my mind, about big book sponsorship, about using the book to bring another through this transformational process where we go from a human being obsessed with ourselves to a spiritual being having a human experience, trying to rely on the grace of God, the guidance and the power of God to live our lives. And we're promised that if we do that, we'll match serenity, match the calamity with serenity, because we're aware that the soul is rock solid, okay, all the time. It's been here a long time. Our body and our minds are temporary, human, physical, mental events. They will not, you're not going to get out of here with your body and your mind. You know, it's prepare to meet your maker. Okay, so, and this part I think is just a fantastic way to read through with another, turn their statements into questions, or you know, a lot of them already are questions, and see what it says. So I'm on page 44, and we'll probably, I hope we'll get 44 and 45, and then we'll proceed next week. Okay. Chapter 4, We Agnostics, page 44. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. You know, all the previous chapters are dealing with the mind and the body. Now we're going to deal with the spirit. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. And then they're going to focus on two things. They're going to focus on the physical part and on the mental part. And they do it with these two questions. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. And if that's true, you are suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. You know, there is a solution. None of us like it. The solution is humbly rely on God and behave the way you think God wants you to behave. Period. It's as simple as that. So what are they looking at? If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, this is the mental part. We can't take it or leave it the way a normal drinker can. We can't take it or leave it. We cannot quit entirely. Or if when drinking, you have little control, what's that aiming at? The allergy, the physical part. We have little control because we have an abnormal reaction to alcohol and we can't stop. If you've got this going on, you know that they're saying probably because you might be a hard drinker. And the difference between the hard drinker and us guys is you give the hard drinker a strong enough mental reason, relationship reason, work reason, physical health reason, some kind of reason, the hard drinker can stop. The hard drinker can stay away from the first drink. And then it says, what about the real alcoholic? You know, we can't stay away. To one who feels he's an atheist or agnostic, such an experience, the spiritual experience, seems impossible. And yet to continue as we are means disaster, especially if we're an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. You know, what do? Could we go over the doom to an alcoholic death again? What that's going to look like? You know, I mean, this should be a no-brainer, right? But it's not for us. You know, how much time I got to make this decision? These are the same two alternatives that we have in the opening words. You know, doomed to trying to go on to the bitter end, trying to blot out of your consciousness how miserable you are, or the other to ask for help. Ask for God's grace to come into your life. But it isn't so difficult. Half our original fellowship were exactly like that. First, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not real alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life, or else we're doomed to an alcoholic death. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you. Cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows you need not be disconcerted. And then we'll get to more of this next week, but here's the real killer. Here's if human power was enough, A, we are alcoholic, cannot manage our own lives. B, no human power is going to save our butts. C, God's spiritual power can and will if we will seek it. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life, this is mental stuff, were enough to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and the mental part of it does not save us, no matter how hard we try physically. No matter how hard we try, we could wish to be moral, wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power was not there. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Jack, and my real problem is that I lack power. Actually, I lack both awareness and power. It's two parts. It's guidance and power. That's what the grace of God is, that I can get the guidance and then I can ask for the power. And without it, I'm screwed. We could wish to be moral, wish to be philosophically comforted. We can wish for serenity. We can pray for serenity. We can plead for serenity. And we cannot get it. The needed power is not there. And the only way we're going to get this power is through a relationship with God. Only way. And if you got your feathers are ruffled about God, or poor old Jesus, I remember going to it. There's this thing called A Course in Miracles, and a Jewish man was presenting all of this stuff, and he was a devout Jew before he'd gone through this stuff. And he's standing up there in the front of the room, and he goes, everybody's got a problem with Jesus. And it just was interesting to hear him say that. And we do. I don't know. I'm not going to go there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously, shortest sentence in the book. Is that obvious to you? It's not to me. I think the admission of if I successfully admit powerlessness, that I can't manage my own life, that's fine. But I don't think it's obvious, and I don't think it's obvious to most of us in here. In fact, it took me not only going through 4 through 9 to see that was obvious. That's the result of my self-reliance. But then it took going through this depression and coming out of it to really see this, obviously. I think it's a key thing. But where and how are we to find this power? That's what this book is about. That's why this book has been written. That's why we want to try to use this book to help other people come into a relationship with whatever the hell you call it. You don't have to call it God if that's a problem. And they're going to say that later on. Okay, time's up. I'm going to stop this recording. We're going to have some open discussion, and I will hope to see you all next week. And thank you very much for your presence here. Bye for now. Whoops.